Item number 22, discussion and direction regarding notices of the proposed increased solid waste fees and rates for a majority protest process in accordance with Proposition 218. Mr. Santos?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As Council will recall, this item was continued from the prior council meeting to today's meeting and was continued from earlier meeting when we were, the city was waiting for information to be provided by Gilton regarding how it establishes its solid waste rates. The city has now received that information. It was included as part of an update provided to council. And as previously directed by council, staff was to bring forward a Prop 218 rate setting for the administrative fee component of the solid waste rates, which currently isn't being charged to customers. But as part of this process and waiting for that additional information from Gilton, and now the city having received that information, it would be the city attorney's office recommendation to do a combination rate setting for both the solid waste rate established by Gilton and the administrative fee component of the solid waste rate that covers the city's costs for processing the solid waste services, meaning both customer service, billing, staff time, etc. But with that, I'll be happy to answer any questions from council.
So basically, it's just to confirm that for you to move forward and come back to council with the breakdown of the rate study.
What we would do is we would bring back effectively the mailer that would go to the parcel owners that would be subject to the fees, and a set of guidelines on how how things would be calculated. I mean, tabulated, any sort of protest. How those items would be received by the city, how they would be tabulated. So we would bring those items back to council for approval. If council approved those items, then they would be mailed out to we would mail them to both the customers and to the property owners, because sometimes those two people can be different. And so we want to ensure that every property owner gets a copy, because each property is subject to, at some point, even if it's an empty lot, at some point they could be, if it's developed, subject to having solid waste services. So it's the preferred practice to send it to the property owners for the majority protest. And then it would be a hearing, rate setting hearing would be set for a minimum of 45 days after the notice is sent out to the ratepayers and the property owners. Roughly. At least a minimum of 60 days. On the higher end, 90 is a typical time frame for a turnaround on this kind of process. Typically, we don't recommend a formal rate study for this type of franchise, because the franchisee is the individual who sets the rates for the service that they're being provided. Versus in this situation, unlike wastewater or water, it's not a service being provided by the city. So typically, what we do is we provide the customers, the ratepayers, and the property owners with the rate being being quoted to the city as part of the RFP process for those services.
Okay.
Sorry, just so I clarify, this is the formal process, but what I was saying is typically with a franchise service that the city is not providing, we don't do a rate study because the entity that's establishing the rate is the franchisee, correct? Versus, our wastewater or our water system, those are services that the city directly provides. So before doing the Prop 218 hearing or rate setting, you typically do a rate study for 5 years, add your CPI, and then approve that, and you do it every 5 years. Here, what we would be doing is, since effectively it's a new contract, new rate, the ratepayers would be approving the or not. They would be considering the new rate being provided. It would be subject to majority protest, which is the requirements of Prop 218. They would receive the 45-day notice, which was required by Prop 218. And then at the end of that, the rates under the contract, I'd have to go back, but I believe the rates under the contract are subject to CPI. So typically with the CPI adjustments, those don't come back. Or have to come back every time the CPI adjustment is triggered. Jurisdictions vary. Some do it every year. So it just depends on the jurisdiction. And the reason, I would say, this wasn't previously recommended is because we had that initial separation between the city and Gilton when it came to how it formulated its rates. We now don't have that separation because we've actively asked them to provide their rates and a breakdown of how it's created. So receiving that information triggers other requirements. Once you have that information, you can't unring the bell. And so that's why our recommendation is do the Prop 218 because we've now asked for that information. It's now in our possession. We should go forward accordingly.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, one question on that. If we're going to figure the city's cost to put the water bill and send it out, and if we decide we don't want to do that, are we going to be able to tell what Gilton's going to charge us extra? Or they can't charge us extra for mailing their bill out?
So right now, the franchise agreement doesn't cover those services, so we would have to negotiate those services with Gilton. It could be more, it could be less. We don't know because it's unclear if they have the infrastructure to do the services that we do right now. And so we don't know what that cost would be if the city didn't perform the service and asked Gilton to do it, or if we did an RFP and tried to bring in another provider to do the customer service and the billing. The administrative fee, staff made a valiant effort to try to be which is required under the law, reasonably proportionate to the actual cost of the service being provided. So the goal of the administrative fee is not to make a profit. That would be illegal. We track, and there's multiple components to it, but we try to track exactly how much time members of city staff spend on solid waste services, and the cost of mailing, phone calls, things of that nature. And they share a percentage of the city's overall costs to run the city. So we try to break it down so it's just exclusively the actions, whether the costs for this service and the staff time for this service is what makes up the administrative fee.
Thank you.
If I recall, Gilton did say that we would have to negotiate that part, that is something that they do offer as a service. But the city of Livingston had been providing for that, and I believe that we've budgeted for admin fees for the next 3 or over the year. It's in the budget. I just can't find where it is. But we are still paying for those admin fees. It's just not coming out of the fund. It's coming out of the general fund.
Correct. So the one benefit that the city has that it didn't have before is we do have the franchise fee that the city approved. But the cost of the administrative fee is being paid from the general fund. There is additional monies to help offset that, but it is coming from the general fund.
Council,
Yes, for that. So there's a difference between the franchise fee and the administrative fee. So for an administrative fee, any sort of fee that's charged by the city for services, the cost needs to be reasonably proportionate to the actual cost of the service being provided. It can't be a for-profit venture. If it's a for-profit venture, it would violate the law. For a franchise fee, it's a different measure. They look at whether the franchise fee is a reasonable estimate of the value of the franchise. When the city council approved the agreement and the franchise fee, staff believed that the percentage, which I believe is 15%, was a reasonable estimate of the value of the city's franchise for providing Gilton with exclusive services or exclusive access to the city's residents and being customers, and exclusive access to the city's roadways, alleyways, et cetera, to provide those services. So they're calculated kind of in two different ways. What is before the council at this time is just the admin fee, which is that actual cost of service fee, and then a rate setting based on that new information that was provided by Gilton, taking that Gilton's rate out to the ratepayers and the property owners, so that they can provide a majority protest if they so choose. Similarly with the admin fee, it would also be the same standard, which is a majority protest.
after a lot of information, what is the direction that you need?
Sorry, I'm asking for direction from council on whether to bring back for council consideration the processes and the notice that would be prepared for establishing the administrative fee for solid waste services, and for consideration of the new rate that Gilton is going to be, or is currently charging for solid waste services pursuant to the RFP that the city previously awarded for pursuant to the contract and RFP that Gilton was awarded. What I will say is, council, it is at council's prerogative whether to move forward or not. The council previously had directed the city attorney's office to go forward with the administrative fee, but in order to save city resources, I wanted to bring this item back to council for direction, because I thought it was in the best interest of the city to also include the rate, Gilton's proposed rate, and add that component in. So that's why this item is before council in the manner it is.
So at
You had something to add?
Just with regard to the franchise fee, the franchise fee was directed to be included in the RFP by council. It was in the RFP. It was included in the contract because it was directed by council to be in the contract. It was not included by staff. It was not included by Mr. Lopez. It was in there because that was the direction of the council, that the city now charge that fee, which is true, it had not been charging previously. But based on that direction, that's how the item went out for RFP, and that's the reason why it was included in the franchise contract.
Roy, I appreciate you clarifying that. Thank you.
Time pause, please, as well, in Mr. Santos' response. Thank you.
Sure. For the franchise fee, under the law, it's required that it be reasonably proportionate to a reasonably proportionate estimate of the value of the franchise. Unfortunately, there's not a lot of guide on how you determine that. Some of the language as you look at things like exclusive access, number of consumers that you're providing exclusive access to, the fact that you're providing no other solid waste provider can come into the city of Livingston and provide solid waste services, only Gilton can. So that's generally right now the state of the law on how you determine what the reasonable value, reasonable estimate of the value of the franchise. And looking at the number of residents that the city of Livingston has, a number of customers, I think it's a little over 3,500 if I remember correctly, given the fact that it is an entirely exclusive, meaning some jurisdictions may have more than one provider. Livingston doesn't, it's only Gilton.
Okay.
We believe that 15% was a fair estimate of the value of the franchise. It's only an estimate. It's
Right.
not an exact calculation.
Okay, but what is the purpose of it? Like, why do we need it? What does it support?
It was a decision by the council to include. It's not required by law, so the council can, if they so choose, defer it, remove it. It's up to the council. It's just a tool available to jurisdictions. What I will say is it's fairly common. In fact, when I came to Livingston, this was the only jurisdiction that I've worked with that didn't have a franchise fee. Most every specialized service usually has a franchise fee, whether it's solid waste, if you have an outside service provider for water, things of that nature. It's fairly common and with public entities, including cities, counties, and special districts.
Right. Okay.
I understand the comment. I don't think the issue was to cancel the franchise agreement. It was more the franchise fee, which it's a fee of the city. So at any time, the city can suspend the charging of that fee. It's intended to be a fee charged to the service provider, not to the end user. Unfortunately, it tends to get passed on to the end user. Which is our residents. But majority of the council can always choose to suspend that amount and not charge it. That's at the discretion of the council at any time. And that would not affect the validity of the franchise agreement with Gilton. Yeah, if I and maybe this will help for clarity. So I had previously been directed by a majority of the council to bring the administrative fee forward. If council would like to decouple those two things, meaning that we don't want to combine them and do them at the same time, meaning the rate and the administrative fee. Or if council would like to provide alternative direction. I just want to make sure that I'm being responsive to council. The intent was to try to save resources by combining them. I just want to make sure that I'm not dropping the ball on an item that council previously gave me direction on.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, I also had, since the ARPA fund, I believe, and Mr. Lopez can correct me, but I believe at the last meeting, we did find out that the city had previously requested to use ARPA funds for solid waste, and that request was denied. This may be different because it is there is an administrative component to it, so doesn't mean that we can't request it again, but I believe in the update that was the information that Mr. Chavarria had provided.
What Roy said that he needs is that for council to give majority approval to provide both, to come back with both the franchise fee and the admin fee. Is that correct?
The admin fee and the solid waste.
Solid waste, yes. To come back.
And I would bring that back to council at the second meeting in September. The notices require a pretty significant amount of detail in order to be transparent to the end users. So the goal would be to bring it back at the second meeting in September.
So, yes, go ahead.
I'd like to make a motion that we bring it forward the first available meeting after the mayor pro tem has his meeting with the staff as he so desires. And that would be my motion. The first available meeting after.
And I will second that.
I think that was exactly what I said. That's exactly what I proposed, but
I just worded.
I said if it's important enough, the meeting could happen tomorrow, and then we can bring this back at the next meeting. But, okay, so there's a motion on the floor. There's a second. Roll call, please.
Roll call. Councilmember Ross.
Yes.
Councilmember Wallace.
Yes.
Councilmember Soto.
To be clear, I also put that motion forward to move forward, so yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Samra.
Remember, it is after the meeting. If a meeting doesn't happen, it's not coming forward. Yes.
Mayor Moran.
Yes.
Motion passes by a vote of 5-0.
All right, next item.